All right, everyone. With me today, I am so excited to have just an absolute superstar with me. Ken Thiry, KT, is the former CEO, chairman, and mayor of DaVita. And we've got him with us today to tell a remarkable story of making DaVita a community first and a company second. Hi, KT. So great to have you here with me.
Greetings, Tracy. It's great to be here.
So KT, tell us the story. I mean, you came into DaVita. It wasn't even called DaVita at the time. It had a great name, Total Renal Care. I opened the book with this story about DaVita, and it was kind of a mess. So tell us what happened. You came in, tell us that transformation story, if you would.
Well, at the point I came in, there had been some trouble. And so the company was very near bankruptcy. We were within about 8 weeks of missing payroll on 8,000 people. We were being investigated by the SEC for some inaccurate financial statements. We were being sued by shareholders. Turnover, we couldn't even track it accurately, but it was very high, well into the 30s. And that's the world as of the moment I arrived. And we set out to, of course, A, turn the company around, but B, we wanted to make it a community first and a company second, right from the word go. That we felt if we waited at all to work on our culture and our principles of community, then we were communicating to everyone that it was the second most important thing. And what we wanted to communicate to everyone is that it was equally important, that avoiding bankruptcy was, of course, crucial, but equally crucial was trying to create a differentially healthy culture.
Absolutely. And tell us, if you would, some of the things that you did to help create that democratic community first.
Well, we really tried to put some beef behind it because you would not be surprised by, lots of people were skeptical when I started talking about community and this and that, because it just seemed like rhetoric and trying to persuade them to stay on the Titanic for another month or two. And so there was appropriately a lot of skepticism, and I respected that. So some of the things that we did is we held nominations for the name of the new company. And we had hundreds of people contribute, and then we had an election. And so the people of DaVita chose the name DaVita, which means giving life. I actually voted for a different name. I came to love the DaVita name so much. But perhaps more powerfully, and before we voted on the name, we went through an 8-month process where we held discussions and votes on the core values. And we just talked about how in the real world, how can a company with X thousand people create a real commitment to core values so that we could talk about them, try to grow within them, et cetera. And so we had discussions with every sort of desirable attribute, and we would just debate them and then vote on them. And it culminated in our first nationwide meeting when we had 800 of our people together, a big expense given we were close to bankruptcy. And at that meeting, we had the final vote for our core values, as well as then the final vote for the name.
And that really laid that foundation to start to make the transition into a much more democratic community first. But KT, I mean, the mental strength that you had to have, I mean, your feet are held to the fire. People are coming in thinking, this guy's crazy. What inspired you? What was guiding you during those beginning days that were challenging? You had to win people over.
Well, I got lucky in a way that wasn't obvious to me at first. When I got the call to interview for the job of becoming CEO of DaVita, although that became mayor of the DaVita Village, became my title instead. I had just come off a very difficult time running a company where we had failed. And we had to lay people off, and we had to liquidate parts of the company. And so I had promised my family that I would take 6 months off because it had been tough. And then I would get calls from search firms saying, are you up for interviewing? And I'd say, no, I'm done in 2 months and I'm going to take time off. And then I got the call from Total Renal Care, which, as you said, was the old name. And we expected the call because I had successfully run a dialysis company before. But I couldn't. I found I couldn't say no on the phone like I did to all the other search firms, because all my memories came flooding back with my first time working in dialysis, which was the most professionally fulfilling time of my life. And so I have no idea what I told the search firm, but I didn't tell them what I was supposed to. And I went home, and my wife was a venture capital partner working at home that day. And I said, Denise, Total Renal Care called today. And she looked over her shoulder and said, well, we've been expecting that. And she turns back to her work. Well, then she notices I'm still standing there. And she turns around again and says, Kent, you didn't. And I felt like a little 10-year-old boy. And I said, didn't what? Because I was scared of how she would react. And she said, you didn't tell them you would interview for that job. And I said, honey, I didn't, but I want to. And she was appropriately livid. She said, you just came off a difficult experience. This is a turnaround. It's in another city. We're not going to move for something that is that tenuous. Plus, by the way, you're the father who said you would spend more time with the family for 6 months. And I said, you're totally right. You're totally right. And I went back and said, no, but they persisted. And Denise and I went through a lot of conversations about what I wanted to do with my life. It was the most serious set of discussions I've ever had about what was the right way to spend my life, because we were financially secure. I was 43 years old. What did I stand for? And after a month, Denise and I and the kids decided together that Daddy should do this because it spoke to his soul, and he thought he could do more good than virtually doing anything else. So it's a kind of a long answer, but where this came in so importantly is I was running into all the skepticism and all the stress of being near bankruptcy. One of the things that kept me going was I had looked my children in the eye and said, Daddy's going to try to do good in this job. That's why he's going to work hard. That's why he's going to travel some. And I will keep you guys involved. They were 10 and 8 at the time, 10 years old and 8 years old. And the fact that I had committed to them that I would not stay in the job unless I was trying to create a special place to work was what got me through, I think, some of the tough times in that first year.
I'm so glad you shared that story, KT, because I hadn't heard that level of depth of how deeply personal, that decision was, but that at that very critical juncture in your life going, I can have a sense of meaning here and I can make a difference. And that it was a sort of democratic family decision. Everyone was all in. I love that. One of my favorite things that you also did at DaVita that's so symbolic, and I think symbolic coming out of this story, is the DaVita Bridge. The bridge that you created. Will you tell us about the DaVita Bridge? I mentioned it briefly in the book.
Well, in that first year and a half, through a lot of meetings and sessions and discussions, we had established a lot of trust with a bunch of people who had decided that, gosh, we really were sincere about being a community first and a company second. And we wanted to somehow come up with something more tangible so that people could declare themselves to be a teammate or a citizen, not an employee. Because it doesn't really matter what I call somebody. If I call them a teammate or a citizen, what matters is how they think about it themselves. And so we came up with the concept of the bridge. And we introduced it. It's the only time in 20 years of my running DaVita that we had 2 nationwide meetings in a year. That's how much importance we placed on it. And we got together in Florida, your new home, and we had probably 1,500 of our top people there, of our teammates, and we introduced the concept of the bridge. And what that means is, if you joined us tomorrow, that we would not say, don't start using our language, don't start claiming that you have fully bought into the core values or our mission. Don't feel pressure to do that right away. Go ahead and be skeptical. Take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and see how we make decisions. See what kind of things we take into account. See how we treat people. So watch all that. But then what we want to do is call the question. And we had bridges in all major neighborhoods. I walked over the bridge on my way to my office and then to my car at the end of the day. I walked over the bridge twice every day to remind myself of what my aspirations were, because the grind of day-to-day work and budgets and capital markets can push that out and squeeze that out. And so the concept of the bridge is that after you've been with us enough time to have information, stand in front of that bridge. Physically, if there's one in that neighborhood of the village, or metaphorically, if you're out in a clinic that doesn't have a bridge. But stand there and decide if you want to become a citizen or teammate of the village, and you want to have shared accountability for whether or not we would create a differentially healthy place for people to work. And if you wanted to do that, walk across the bridge. You don't have to do it publicly. We'll never ask if you crossed it because we didn't want to introduce peer pressure. And of course, if you cross the bridge and a year later, you decided that we weren't sincere, we weren't competent, you could go back across. It wasn't a permanent commitment. But it's like the difference between living with someone and knowing you love them, but then deciding you want to get married. It's really different to propose for marriage versus just living together for many people. And just like while marriages don't work out, of course, again, we said you can come back. And so we had thousands of people. And as we grew to have 75,000 teammates, we had thousands of people every year who would walk across the bridge. Often they'd get their picture taken, because that's the moment that, just like if you moved to America from Egypt 3 years earlier, and now you're becoming an American citizen, this was saying, yeah, of course I was an employee before, but now I'm declaring that I'm a citizen of the village, and I will share accountability. Not that I'm the boss of everything, but I will share accountability for trying to make this a special place.
I love that. I remember several years ago, I got to go to one of the nationwides, and I've actually been to several DaVita Nationwides, thanks to you. And they're so moving and so touching, and see everyone together, and the energy is just incredible. And one of the years, we gave you the Lifetime Achievement Award from WorldBlu, and you were so dear and said, I'm not accepting this for me. This is a whole village-wide award. And so we gave it to the whole DaVita Village. And after I got to give that award to everyone, there was the bridge was on stage. And after, everyone cleared out and the lights went down, I was like, I'm going to walk across the bridge. And I like had tears in my eyes. I mean, it was so meaningful and so symbolic and so moving. And I love everything that bridge stands for, and what you do with that, KT. It's just such a moving story. So, and it's touched my life as well. So I'm so grateful.
It's been moving for so many people. Because we always told people they could do it privately or publicly. We'd have teams cross the bridge together. I'd have people say that we're coming to Denver, which is where our headquarters was, and can we get a picture with you on the bridge? Oh. So this was not some superficial rhetorical flourish. This was not some marketing idea. This was about people making deep-seated commitments to a set of values, and recognizing all of us are imperfect. None of us gets each core value perfectly every day. But that's why we work so hard to create a sort of democratic spirit where we could talk about where we fell short, where we could have teams say, out of the 7 core values, because we ended up moving from 6 to 7 by election, a second election, that when we did that, we wanted to make sure that we got to the point where we all recognize we're imperfect. We're not perfect role models for each value every day. And so you have to get to the point where you can talk about them, because that's what makes it real. That's when you start helping the core values sing. When you talk about, typically, when you're at your best with respect to them, and you do something beautiful, and when you're at your worst. And then you have to admit a week later, you know what? In that meeting last week, I did not behave in a way consistent with the core values. Then you know they're alive when they get talked about in the context of real life.
I love that. KT, as we wrap up here, it's incredible, the story of DaVita. You obviously, got out of that, messy beginning to build this highly successful global multi-billion-dollar company that's been WorldBlu certified since 2008 as a Freedom Center company, shining light. We're so excited about that. What are you most proud of, my friend? What are you most proud of as you think back on your 20 years at DaVita?
Well, I'm gonna cheat and say two things.
Okay.
First, we became a clinical leader, both in terms of our operating performance, what our actual outcomes were for our patients, and in terms of innovation, where we were at the cutting edge of driving improvements in care or reductions in cost for the same care. And so that's one. And the second one was we did, in many cases, not all 75,000 teammates, but for an unusually high percentage, we created an environment together where we had a special degree of trust, a special degree of respect, a special degree of caring. Again, highly imperfect, but highly energetic. And by doing that, we added value to a lot of people's lives, not just as nurses or technicians or doctors, but as mothers and fathers and daughters and husbands. We did things like Myers-Briggs tests. We did a lot of self-awareness. Remember, we had 30,000 people who had never been to college. And so that gift of helping thousands of people become more self-aware, thousands of people become more mindful, so it affects their entire life. And then for the executives and the people who became executives in the front lines, that changed them as leaders. And so even when they would leave the village and go to a different company, they would send back notes saying, hey, we just voted on our core values. We never would have done that unless we'd had the DaVita experience. We just did a core value award ceremony. Never would have done that. So I think the second thing is just that we helped thousands of people at all income levels become more mindful. And for many, it changed the way they led for the rest of their life. And so that, I think, was the second thing I just was thrilled to be a part of, which is all that I was, is a part of it.
I love it. Well, that DaVita way is shining a light. It's rippled out. It's changing individuals' lives, changing their families, changing the communities, changing your patients' lives. And that's what it's all about. Thank you for being such a shining light on the hill that DaVita is. It's just been such a joy to be able to share the story of DaVita in Freedom at Work. So thanks so much, KT, for being with us. Really appreciate having you here.
Well, and thank you, Traci, and thank you for all your help along the way, you and your organization that helped hold us accountable for our rhetoric to make sure it wasn't just rhetoric, but it was reality. So thank you.
You guys did it all the way. Thanks so much, KT.
Cheers.